Are we ready? Awesome.
I am so excited that Neurodiversity Day is finally here. I feel like we've been talking about it for an entire semester, and I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for joining us either live or if you're here via live stream. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Heidi Ochoa. I am the Academic Senate President, and I'm also the Communication Studies Professor here at Saddleback College. At the very beginning of the year, I communicated in the form of a speech that I have a deep passion for improving education for the sake of disabled students. And the start of my passion really started when my son was diagnosed with autism, and I got bombarded with books and the medical industry and the therapeutic industry. And when I walked into the classroom, I found after his diagnosis that I had changed forever, that I was waking up in entirely different ways in the classroom. So no longer could I look at a student and say he was disengaged, or no longer could I look at a student and say she didn't care. I was starting to really notice that that student was stressed out. That student was not doing well with the environmental noise. That student may not be getting the right cues from me, and so I had to slow down and make sure that I was getting, prepping my lectures and my activities in such a way that my students could identify, relate, and really sit in with the material. So that was a huge moment for me in my professional career, and I have to thank my son and the therapeutic and medical industry for that. Another powerful moment for me as an educator was also when I learned this word neurodiversity. So when my son was diagnosed, I ended up just reading all the literature possible. And some of it was super dated and some of it was not. And what I found was a lot of the literature was really framing disability treatment and parenting towards curing or fixing your child. And that is really, in a lot of presentation off to them, I have a round of thank yous that I would like to go over because there were so many people that contributed to this day, and I want to make sure that they're getting all the credit. So big fat thank you to Professors Carmen Mara Hernandez Bravo and Ken Woodward, who actually introduced me to the speakers. Professor Stacy Eldred and Ephraim Ravel for contributing to the conversations of this project. We have counselors Michael Hoggett, Tina Shafee, Lisa McAfee, Amy Strange, Zena Borentek. Flex coordinator Dan Walsh for actually giving us this whole day to celebrate neurodiversity. We also have Director of Strategic Enrollment Management, Nick Perry, Interim Dean Liberal Arts, Jack Beckham, Technical Services Librarian, Lydia Tamaran, who actually gave us access to the movie that we're going to be watching at the end of today. Vice President of Student Services, Juan Avalos, and his executive assistant, Celia Perez, who helped me manage the paperwork for the speakers today. We also have Executive Director of the College Foundation, Elizabeth McCann, who gave us some funding to provide lunch for faculty who are participating in the training. We have Theater Productions and Operations Manager, Michelle McDougall-Jackson, Lighting and Sound Designer, Tim Swiss, Media Production Specialist, Matt Rodet, and Administrative Assistant, Christy Smead, who helped with organizing this event. So if we could just give them a quick round of applause. So the structure of the day goes like this. We got a keynote, and then immediately after we have a faculty training. The faculty training is open to both part-time and full-time faculty. Part-time faculty will be compensated for their time. At the end of the training, you'll receive a Neuro Prep badge that you can add to your email and your resume, so that's real cool. We will be providing, again, thank you to the Foundation Office, lunch for those participating in the training. And the lunch will be from Paradise Cafe, which we all love for their cookies. And then the final shout out that I wanted to give was to Jen Kakula and Brett Myron, who are also going to be hosting accessibility for online training. If you want to sign up for their program, they have 3 spots left, and you'll want to reach out to Jennifer Kakula sometime soon before that program gets started. But without further ado, I want to kick it off to Sasha and Yaz.
Is this your time?
Oh.
Okay. Good morning. Thank you for that warm welcome. My name is Yasamine Bolourian, and I'm here with my colleague Sasha Zeedyk, and we are so honored to be celebrating Neurodiversity Day here at Saddleback College with you all. So Sasha and I have been in the field studying neurodiversity and related topics for many years, so we're happy to have a captive audience to share with you a little of what we know about the literature on neurodiversity, as well as from our own research on neurodivergent students and their college professors. So to provide a little bit of context, there's an increasing number of neurodivergent students entering college. And these students are typically accustomed to receiving a wide array of support services from their K-12 education. Unfortunately, when they arrive at college, there seems to be this kind of mismatch between available supports and student needs. We're also seeing an added challenge of autonomy and advocacy. So as young adults, students are now having to decide whether or not they want to disclose their diagnosis and decide whether or not they want to receive accommodations on campus. So coupled together, the challenge of, the lack of services, a mismatch of services, the critical decision to self-advocate, it really contributes to or puts them at risk for, academic failure and sometimes even dropping out. So knowing this, it's kind of our duty as members of the campus community to do what we can to create a campus culture that supports, values, and empowers neurodivergent students in a meaningful way. This isn't always easy, change can be hard, but it is well worth it. At colleges who have leaders and instructors and staff who are committed to a neurodiverse a neurodiversity affirming culture, the benefits can be immense, including greater student retention, access to services, cross-campus collaboration, and greater mission transparency. So by being here today and kind of engaging in this dialogue, we're all making steps towards this mission. In our keynote this morning, we will be starting off by talking a little bit about what Heidi had kind of mentioned, language and the practical importance of how we talk about neurodiversity. We'll then be getting into the literature around neurodiversity before sharing with you some of our own research on developing a faculty training program, which you'll get to experience later today. And then we'll end with some key takeaway points. So Sasha and I will be dividing the presentation. You'll be hearing from both of us this morning. All right, so let's set the stage and talk about neurodiversity. What does it mean? Who does it include? And where does it stem from? So neurodiversity refers to the wide range in differences in how we think and how we process information. It is the natural and valuable form of human diversity. So neurodiversity includes everyone, and it represents the normal variation between individuals. So you may say that, Saddleback College has a neurodiverse student body, and that each student has its very unique learning needs and learning styles. Historically, the medical model has dominated people's opinions and interests. So for example, people's interests in finding a cure or finding the cause of autism. On the other hand, a neurodiversity lens considers the condition of autism to be part of one's identity. And rather than considering autism as a deficit or difference to be fixed, the neurodiversity movement is a strength-based view of people with neurological or neurodevelopmental differences. And within this framework, neurological differences are a part of human diversity that should be celebrated. Neurodivergence is another term related to neurodiversity. This is kind of a new term that challenges how we label neurodevelopmental differences. It includes students with autism, ADHD, learning disabilities, Tourette's, dysgraphia, and so on. We focus on autism and ADHD as two forms of neurodivergence that have been particularly stigmatized and underserved in college. So autism is a complex neurodevelopmental condition that includes features within these two areas, social communication and interaction, as well as restricted and repetitive interests. So students with autism may have difficulty responding to social interactions or initiating social interactions. They may have limited eye contact or may kind of avoid eye contact. They may have these really interesting and cool focuses and interests. They may be sensitive to sensory input, such as lights and sounds and so forth. Students with autism or people with autism or ADHD, they may have difficulties with executive functioning, activity, attention, and so these students may struggle with time management, organization. They may kind of be on the go, kind of fidgety in the classroom. So across the board with these two conditions, you'll see features that may impact their academic success. Now, language use has been a hot topic, kind of topic of debate, particularly in the autism community. And there are two schools of thought here. There's the person-first language and then identity-first language. So the one view is that many people, the person-first language is, many people in the autism and education fields have been trained to use this view and kind of feel more comfortable in using person-first language. It stems from the 1970s with the increased inclusion of people in college and in US classrooms. And the idea is that we should be putting the person first and that their disability is just one part of them. So in this view, we would refer to the individual as a person with autism. The alternate view, which is kind of preferred by the autism community, or many in the autism community, is identity first. And the thought here is that if we celebrate neurological differences as part of human diversity, we should refer to the individual as an autistic person. And in this case, we highlight the individual's differences as a strength and an important part of who they are. Now, today you'll hear Sasha and I kind of use these two forms of language interchangeably out of respect for both views, but sometimes some people suggest that just as you would perhaps do with gender pronouns, that you should ask an autistic person how they prefer for others to refer to their autism. We do this in our own research with autistic people, and we ask them before we begin any sort of activity, how do you prefer that we refer to your autism in order to respectfully move forward? So what do we know about the research on neurodivergence from the literature? Over the last several decades, post-secondary schools have attempted to differentiate themselves in order to meet the unique needs of students as well as their interests. And so as a result, college options have increased in variation. For many students wishing to pursue higher education, deciding what type of college to attend can be one of the biggest decisions, and it could come down to things like cost, the college's location, as well as the quality of education. For neurodivergent students who are college-bound, this decision may weigh a little bit more heavily, as it may make the difference between years of, college success or challenges. Interestingly, research looking at autistic students in particular shows that these students are attending two-year colleges more so than four-year colleges. So for example, from the National Transitional Longitudinal Study 2, we see that autistic students are attending two-year colleges at 46% versus about 12% at four-year colleges. And so we can look at some of the beneficial features of two-year colleges to really understand why we're seeing some of these differences. In a study conducted by Zeedyk and colleagues, they identified that two-year colleges typically have, a lighter workload. They can individualize their support services, so really tailor them to student needs. And they also, students are reporting greater faculty connections at two-year colleges. So knowing what we know, four-year institutions have started to try to model their features and implement some of these things into their own systems. So according to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, we know that the prevalence rate for autism is 1 in 44, and for ADHD, it's 1 in 10. Males are more often diagnosed than females for both conditions, and we're also seeing an increase in prevalence rate across both. So from 2009 to 2017, there was an increase of about 13% for ADHD and a whopping 122% for autism. And so such increased prevalence figures can be attributed to a couple different things. So for one, we're seeing greater awareness of autism and greater awareness of ADHD and what that is. There's changing diagnostic criteria over the years. And then there's also differences in how we are kind of practicing interacting with and working with people who have autism and ADHD in clinical and school settings. So all these things kind of contribute to the increase in prevalence. Well, you might be asking yourselves, how commonly can we expect to see students with autism and ADHD in our classrooms? Unfortunately, there's limited research in this area. The research on neurodivergence in college is still in its infancy. Existing data, though outdated, suggests that there are as many as 2% of students with autism and 5% of students with ADHD in US colleges. And there seems to be a steady increase in enrollment in both 2- and 4-year colleges, so it's safe to assume that you will have these students enrolled in your classrooms. Now, there are a couple interesting factors to keep in mind when kind of answering this question. So the first is that not all neurodivergent students report their diagnosis. And again, coming back to what we talked about earlier, some of this might be their own choice. They may not want to disclose that they have a disability out of fear of being stigmatized or labeled or thought to be different by their peers or their faculty. Second, not all neurodivergent people have a diagnosis, and this can be because they've managed to succeed academically throughout their K through 12 years and have kind of slipped through the cracks, and so they may not be aware that there are these accommodations that can be beneficial in college for them. And then third, specific majors might attract more neurodivergent students than others. We've seen some literature suggest that neurodivergent students prefer STEM fields, others say more of the arts. For us, anecdotally, we've seen that many history professors indicate that they have neurodivergent students in their classrooms who are really fascinated by the form of discussion. Oh, gonna skip that one. College faculty play a substantial role in post-secondary educational experiences and success of neurodivergent students. Research has shown that while faculty typically report positive attitudes, they may be a bit skeptical about students who have these invisible disabilities like autism and ADHD compared to physical disabilities. They may be a little bit ambivalent about including them in the classroom because they think that they will distract others and they'll take up more time. And so overall, we're seeing that faculty can either kind of make or break the student experience. So Sasha and I researched this topic a little bit further in our studies, and I don't want to give too much away because I'm about to pass the mic, but there are these two kind of fascinating quotes that have come from our interviews with students and college faculty. So this quote at the top, it says, "To be honest, high school was the worst part of my life and college is just marginally better." This is not the experience of all students necessarily, but we did find from our studies that a large majority or a large number of students did feel that way about their college life. And from this college professor, they said, "I want to be a good professor, but I really don't know how to interact well with a student who has trouble discerning emotions and others' thoughts and feelings." So I think this really demonstrates the good intentions of college faculty and instructors and how they really want to be able to learn how to better accommodate students in the classroom. So at this point, I'm going to pass it over to Sasha, and then you'll hear from me at the end.
Before we get started, I just want to give a shout out to Heidi because she got a shout out to everyone else but herself, so we should give her a round of applause. Okay, so yeah, this brings us to our own work that we've done in this area, a study called the Autism 101 study. This is our research basis for developing our training, and even though these data were collected a while ago now, about 2015 is when we wrapped up data collection, we're still one of the very few studies who've actually talked to faculty as part of our study and students in trying to inform the development of a training for faculty. And so our study resulted in 2 publications. We're happy to share those. If you're coming to the training, you'll have access to those, in which we used mixed methods research. We did both interviews with autistic college students, students with ADHD, and faculty, as well as a faculty survey. And so the aims of our study were, to evaluate the post-secondary experiences and needs of students with ASD, and to compare these experiences with those students with ADHD, and then to identify the knowledge or lack of knowledge that faculty have working with this population. You can see here the demographic information from our qualitative portion of the study. So we interviewed 13 students with autism, 18 with ADHD, and 18 faculty. This was all at the campus that we were at the time in grad school at UC Riverside. And so you can see the breakdown. Most of the students were undergrads, and most of the faculty had, a lot of experience teaching, et cetera. So we obviously took demographic information. Our interviews were about 45 minutes long. We audio taped them, we transcribed them. We spent many months coding them to get to 85% agreement between us. And we also calculated frequencies so we can make comparisons between the groups. And then we published the 2 studies. The first study was focused on comparing the students with autism to the students with ADHD and focused more on student experiences, a lot of the student views, and then the second paper looked at faculty and students with ASD and really was focusing on, faculty and the things that faculty need to know. So this is a table out of the first publication, and you can see a number of themes that emerge from our data for this paper. And we also have these broken down by the percent of themes endorsed by each group. And you can see that there's a couple themes where there were actually differences between the group. For example, opinions of medication use was talked about a lot more about in the ADHD group because a lot more students with ADHD were taking medication for their ADHD. And so the more interesting, or at least in my opinion, piece of this is what the students said, right? So one of our first themes was academic experiences, or expectations, I'm sorry. And that's all about self-expectations that the students had for themselves, as well as perceived expectations of faculty on their academic performance. So an example is a lot of people with disabilities will just drop out of college because they kind of see it as a zero-sum game where they can't ever catch up. So we heard a lot of students talking about, feeling behind or feeling different than their peers in their classes. And this quote here really illustrates that. Another one of the quotes that are themes that emerged was disclosure of diagnosis. So if you don't know, many faculty and people on campuses know, but students have to disclose their disability in order to obtain services. So a lot of students talked about this when we asked them about their experiences in college. Here's a quote. It says, "I've personally always been very hesitant to ask for services because I don't have that many needs, because I don't flap, I don't get easily overwhelmed by crowds of people. A lot of common things that people on the spectrum have, I don't have, so therefore I always kind of feel guilty if I need to ask for something, like disability services. It feels like I'm kind of taking advantage." And we did hear this from several students, and we know from the literature that a lot of students, a lot of neurodivergent students don't disclose their disability. They come to college, they don't want stigma attached to themselves, they want a fresh start, they don't necessarily see the utility of the services, or they think they can do it without them. And so we did hear a lot of this in our interviews. Another theme that emerged was the theme of comorbid conditions. So this is pretty prominent across both groups. Comorbid conditions are where there's co-occurring diagnosis. So things like anxiety, depression, other mental health problems came through these interviews. So this says, "I was really stressed out and I got depressed. I was so unhappy that I almost committed suicide. I was going through emotional and mental problems." And then junior year, since I'm still a relatively brand new transfer student, I still had these problems, but not to a higher degree compared to my sophomore year. Hopefully my last year will be better. So, we did hear students talk about, feeling very seriously depressed, like this student who had considered suicide. This was actually a very interesting theme that kind of surprised us, was the amount of self-awareness that some students had. So, they would compare themselves in terms of their academic and social abilities, to their neurotypical peers. This student with ASD said, "I think I really truly understood how different I was when I started college, and I saw the big gap between me and my peers when it came to emotional health and my ability to handle situations myself." A lot of previous research, or historically, has sort of discounted the own perceptions of people with autism as, they're poor reporters of their feelings, they don't understand their feelings, and stereotypical things like that. Whereas we found that actually many students were very self-reflective and understood and recognized that they were different, and wanted to succeed in spite, or even though that they had these differences. And so that's sort of some of the themes, just a highlight of some of the themes from the students. You will, if you stay for the whole day, at the end of the day, there's a documentary being shown, Autism Goes to College, and that was produced by our advisor from graduate school. So we have a little clip here from the film, so you might see this part twice today, where we actually have some quotes from the faculty interviews. So we'd like to play that for you now. Maybe. Oh.
I'll pull it back up.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay.
I'm afraid to push anything. That's okay. Thank you.
Honestly, some of the best writers I've had have self-identified. I feel lucky to work with such bright young people, and I hate the stigma they often get from faculty.
Well, there has to be a balance between accommodating students' special needs and the needs of the rest of the class, especially when safety is a factor.
I have a bright student who stims in class and have noticed other students looking curiously. I'm not certain what to say, if anything.
I have some students with autism who are high performing but take up a lot of airspace. I admit I sometimes get irritated.
I'm sometimes skeptical, and I wonder to what extent some students exaggerate the need for special services.
There are no extra resources for teachers who have students with autism in their classrooms. Something has to change.
I'm not sure what to do about students that I think may benefit from accommodations but haven't disclosed. I don't want to trespass on their privacy or offend them.
Students with autism contribute a lot precisely because they think differently.
So in addition to seeing the film, if you stay the whole day, there is a website, autismgoestocollege.org, where you can check out other clips like that. There's resources and things being added to the website, or at least we think being added to the website regularly. So it's definitely something to check out. There's a blog. It's a great place for extra resources if you're still interested in this topic after today. Hopefully you're more interested in the topic after today. All right, so you get some from those quotes, from hearing the faculty, the things that we heard from faculty, you can really get a sense that it was such a wide array, right? Some faculty really wanted to be helpful. I'm assuming the people who are here have an interest in neurodiversity, and that's why you're here. Hopefully the people who are watching live stream also feel, a passion toward helping all students. But we also heard from faculty who had sort of a negative attitude about providing accommodations and, kind of got irritated by the students in their class, asking too many questions, dominating the conversation. And so, it really told us, something needs to be done where we can help faculty understand how to better work with these students. And, we don't want faculty being irritated with students or, that's obviously going to be reflected in the way that they interact and work with these students and help these students. And we know that the students, a lot of them are anxious and depressed and already having a hard time. So we need to find a way to, get faculty on board. So we've, had, like I said, we've had this passion for a long time. And so as a second part of the study, we distributed a survey to 132 faculty. That was an extension of our interviews. So it asked similar questions to the interviews, but in a quantitative way. So we asked demographic questions. We asked questions about teaching style, knowledge of autism, knowledge about provision of disability services, understanding of students with autism. We also asked, if they would be willing to share anything additional about working with students with autism. Is there anything they'd like to share about working with disability services? And is there anything else? And so we actually kind of got a lot of open-ended responses, which isn't always the case with survey questions. So just to highlight some of the results from the survey, and this is definitely by no means everything, only 45% had a statement about disability services in their syllabi. And this shocked us because this is usually a requirement on campuses. And hopefully this number's gone up since 2015. But even though it's an expectation that faculty have this, we actually found that to be pretty low. 12%, which isn't a lot, but still kind of a lot, said that they didn't really understand the role of disability services. 47% believe that students should have to interact with other students in the classroom, and I agree with this, but I also think that, for students who are neurodivergent, this isn't an easy task, so we as faculty really need to think about how to facilitate these interactions. And then the majority indicated willingness to allow a student with autism to work in their lab or on their research team, which that sort of also surprised us in a good way, that these faculty were, open to having students with autism work on their research. And then again, the majority indicated that they would be willing to participate in a training. So through our interviews, through this survey, we did find that many faculty were interested and wanted this type of training. So some implications to our first set of studies here are, that autistic students often use an array of strategies that involve faculty assistance in overcoming obstacles that they may have, including asking for help, requesting clarification on assignments, seeking accommodations. So it's really important that faculty feel equipped to effectively teach these neurodivergent students. Across studies, like I said, faculty expressed, a need and that they wanted guidance in working with these students. They didn't really know what to do. And so, we decided that it was time from this, to then develop a faculty training. So that leads us to our next set of studies, NeuroPrep, which stands for Professor's Relationship and Education Program, and that's the training that we'll be giving today. But we want to give a little bit of information about our development of this program. So the goals are to prepare college faculty to work with neurodivergent students and to create conditions in the classroom that are better for neurodivergent students in post-secondary settings. And our training is broken into 4 modules. The first module is really focused on defining what neurodiversity is, understanding some of the terminology that Yaz covered, and what is autism and what is ADHD. Our second part of the training, the second module, focuses on the needs and strengths of the students. We like to take a strength-based view. These students, as Heidi said in her introduction, have, strengths that we can bring that they can bring to the table. Module 3 focuses on ways that faculty can support these students. So that's what faculty really wanted to know. And then in the last module, we have a number of case studies to illustrate, think through the ways that we might take the things that we learned in the first 3 modules and apply them to actual cases. Of course, there's no way we could cover everything. So usually when we give a training or a talk like this, every faculty has an instance that they want to ask about, right? I had this one student who, whatever, but we try to build a toolbox of strategies where hopefully you would kind of be able to pull from all the things that you learn and apply it to your individual example. So in developing this training, after we developed the modules, we employed an advisory committee to review, and we really wanted this to be a research-based training. So we had an advisory committee who reviewed all of the training materials for the objectives, the content, the feasibility, and we had 3 different groups of stakeholders as part of our advisory committee. So we had 4 neurodivergent students, 4 faculty, and 2 disability support staff. So we really tried to include all the groups that we thought would really be good at giving us feedback on the appropriateness of our training. And I should give a shout out to Ken here because he was one of our advisory committee members. Our neurodivergent students had about 5 years on average in college. I think one of them, or 2 of them, grad students? I don't remember. Yeah, I think 2 of them were grad students. We had experienced faculty and disability service staff. And we should just note that all the people on our committee, faculty and staff, said that they had a family member on the spectrum, and all but one of them had a family member with ADHD. So they also had a personal interest as well. Just to kind of give some idea of what we did, we met in groups or individually depending on the preferences of of the participants on the advisory committee talked about, this is what the process of reviewing these are going to look like. We went through the materials, went through the evaluation sheets that we had created, and then we gave the advisory committee members 1 month to go through and review the training for us. Then we followed up via focus groups on Zoom. So our measures included initial impressions. So we asked things like, what do you think about the name of the training? When you heard that a training like this was being developed, what came to mind? To kind of get a sense, do they think it's a good idea? What are their initial impressions? And then what would they like to see in the training? So kind of like what were their expectations going in? Then we asked them to write feedback using rating scales on language, content, impact, and format. And they also had space where they could literally comment slide by slide. So we got some people who really thoroughly gave us feedback slide by slide. One of the strengths of neurodivergent people is they're very detail oriented. And then we had our focus group follow-ups where we went over we had already gone through all the feedback forms. We came up with 7 specific questions that we wanted based on the aggregated data, but we also had open-ended conversations about what people thought of the training. So you'll see here, across the top are our modules 1 through 4. Down the side are the different areas where we had the people, rate our training, and we did pretty good. They're pretty high ratings. People were happy with, the advisory committee was pretty happy with it. But they did give us really valuable feedback on some things, some language, some of the images, things like that, to fix and make it better. So overall, it was a very positive experience and a very positive review. But like I said, they offered good insight as to how to improve the program. This is not an exhaustive list, but some examples of things to change. Some of our slides were too wordy. We had some puzzle piece. You may associate puzzle piece images with autism. Many people do. We had a couple slides with puzzle pieces. Our advisory committee advised us against this. I don't have time to get into why they didn't want images associated with Autism Speaks, but happy to have a side conversation about that. They wanted us to add some information about common misconceptions of neurodiversity, define certain terms. So we come from education, so we have things like scaffolding and accommodation, so they said we need to be more explicit about some of these terms we included. And then they asked us to include an additional case scenario. And some of the strategies that kind of emerged from the advice from our advisory committee and the development of this training are that faculty really need to know the applicable laws, the rights that students have. They need to be able to anticipate and accommodate for the most common challenges that these students will face. And one of the things that we beefed up after our advisory committee was talking more about universal design for learning. Although the training is I would not call it a UDL training, we do highlight some of the principles of UDL. So UDL is really a framework that, if you're not familiar with it, where you make changes to your class, changes to your pedagogy, changes to your classroom that really will benefit all students. But by doing this, you're really going to also help those neurodivergent students. So things like, giving the objectives for the lesson ahead of time, maybe putting it up on the board, providing rubrics, things you might already be doing in your classroom. These are just, giving regular feedback, multiple modes of assessment, things like that. All right, I'm gonna hand it back over to Yasamine to close us out, go over some implications.
Thank you. Yeah, so where do we go from here, right? So what we're finding across the previous and recent literature and research, including our own, is that many instructors, as well as leaders and staff, many of them maintain kind of low levels of awareness, maybe a little bit of ambivalence in working with neurodivergent students, and a lot of that stems from not knowing, right? So really boosting or promoting these programs, these trainings, neurodiversity days, where we can learn about how to best work with our neurodivergent students. That's going to be kind of key here moving forward. There's a wide range of support systems that may be available on campus, but we know that the onus is on the student to actually disclose their difficulties. These students will likely not do that unless they get to a point where they're kind of in a crisis mode, right? The other thing is if they don't feel like their environment isn't safe, isn't trusting, they also will not be inclined to disclose and feel like they're welcome to do so. And so we need to create a trusting and inclusive environment tolerant of differences in order to make sure that our neurodivergent students can come forward and talk about their differences, talk about what needs that they have in order for us to better support them and accommodate their needs. And one way we can make sure that all students flourish is by using universal design strategies that offer customized support services and flexibility in the classroom to meet our students' unique needs. There's a rise in diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts in post-secondary settings. And the message that we and many of our colleagues have been pushing is that neurodiversity really should be recognized as one of those forms of diversity, and initiatives to inspire equitable experiences for these students, like Neurodiversity Day, should be common practice. It's also important that we demonstrate humility and ask ourselves, what can we be doing better? Whether it's the language that we use, the language that we use to interact with these students, how we construct our courses, we really should be asking ourselves how we could be doing better. And if we don't know, we can ask. There are folks here on this very campus who are here to support faculty and instructors, including the Disabled Students Programs and Services, DSPS office, the Academic Writing Center or Reading Center, the health center, right? So all of these folks can be supportive in helping you think about how we could be doing better to support neurodivergent students on campus. And of course, you can always reach out to myself and to me and Sasha with any questions or any specific instances where you may want feedback. We're here to provide that support as well. We have our contact information in a few slides. I just wanted to say thank you to our advisory committee, Ken Woodward, and others who were very, very helpful and supportive in helping us develop our training. Thank you to all the research participants who volunteered their time and shared their experiences with us, to our research assistants, to our collaborators, our funder, and for you all for inviting us here and being a captive audience. Here's our contact information. Please feel free to reach out to us, connect with us, share your experiences, and we'd love to hear from you. So I think we have time for questions. Is that right, Heidi? So we'll end here. Thank you.
Any questions for Sasha? Yasamine? Yeah. Let me get you a mic, Erica.
Oh, I'm sorry. I would have given it to you. Or we can yell. I'll squeeze by you. There you go.
Hi, thank you so much. I had a question about the stats about, what was it? The 46% of the students go to community college or two-year college. And then I was wondering how many of those transfer, and if you were following that, and then how they feel, if after they transfer, like, are they getting more support at the four-year level, or is it better for them here?
Well, I think that a lot of them do transfer, but I don't think that we have the data to know how many are actually transferring. I know that that's the goal probably for all of them coming in. In terms of supports, I think it really depends on the college. So some community colleges are great, and we hear that they had better support before they got to their four-year university. I would say that a lot of times community colleges are smaller, so they feel like a easier transition out of high school into a community college setting. And then when they get to a university, sometimes that can be overwhelming because it's so large and, you know, so many students. You have to wait for a long time to get, you know, like you have to get the appointment at the disability services early. But some community colleges, you know, are understaffed and, you know, they don't have a great disability service. I don't think that's true here. We talked to your DSPS services before coming here, and you all are having neurodiversity day. So obviously, you know, you are making great efforts to accommodate students, but I don't think that's true at every community college. I don't know, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, so I think one of the main takeaways here is that there's a lot of variation. Research in this topic is still in its infancy, and so we don't really have great data to answer that question. I agree with a lot of what Sasha said. I think at four-year universities, a lot of students can kind of slip through the cracks, and long wait times, difficulty navigating campuses, and not very transparent supports. With that said, there are also these four-year universities that have specific programs, like autism programs, that really help support neurodivergent students on their campus in different ways. Oftentimes, those programs come with a cost. So in addition to tuition and all the other things, they have to pay for these programs to help support them as well. So again, lots of variations in college types and support programs. We don't have great data to answer that question, but it's a really good question.
Ariel, you're going to make me travel all the way over there.
Why is there so little research? It seems like this is...
She asked.
I heard her. Why is there so little research? I don't know the answer to that either. I mean, when I was in graduate school, I said to my advisor, I said, I'd really be interested in understanding more about college students. And like when I first started in this area, which was probably 2012 or 13 when I was in my PhD program, there was like almost nothing. I did a literature review, and there was like barely anything published in this area at all. Now, over the last 10 years, a lot of people have gained interest in this area, and there's a group called the College Autism Network, and you can go to their website if you're interested. It's a group that's all that they're focused on, and there's a collaborative of researchers within that group that we're part of called Canvas, not like the learning management system, but College Autism Network Virtual Association of Scholars, where we meet and we present like what we're working on with each other and talk about, you know, these gaps in the field and how we really need to increase this area of research. So I would say, you know, in the last, 5 to 10 years, a lot more has been published in this area, but we still need more. And you'd think it'd be easier to get funding, but then it is too, but it's not as easy as it should be.
Yeah, we're still missing a lot of like big data on this topic. And I think Sasha alluded to this, it comes down to money a little bit too. Oftentimes grants fund early childhood education projects. They're really interested in, funding intervention studies. What are some other things that so it comes down to funding, right? And so we're starting to see big grants, federal grants, being more interested in learning about neurodiversity in college, but it's slow trickling in.
Yes. My question was in one of your slides. You talked about 46% of the students usually go to the two-year colleges, and then you listed some of the reasons, and one of the reasons was a lighter load. I wanted to know what you meant by that.
That was your study. Oh, yeah. Well, that's actually not from, I'm trying to think of where I pulled that, what article I pulled that from. it's from that literature search, but yeah. I don't remember what study that's published in, but I could try to find it for you. That's one of the things that's reported in the literature, is that, I would say what they're implying is that the classes are easier, although I don't necessarily believe that to be true. But I'm happy to try to find the study that I got that citation from. Yeah.
Well, I think lighter load often means, based on my experience, that they can take fewer courses.
Maybe that's what that means. Yeah, that they can take fewer courses. I know that, and I don't know what I should maybe have done my research before coming here, but I know, for example, at Fullerton, where I'm a professor, you have to take a certain number of units for your financial aid to keep working and all those things. And sometimes neurodivergent students have a difficult time with that, where it's maybe easier for them to take only a couple classes at a time. So maybe that's what that means. I'd have to look it up in the study. I can't, it's been a while.
That would be my guess, is because when you go to a 4-year institution, usually you have to take between 15 and whatever units, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we're encouraged to encourage students to take at least 15 units, which even for neurotypical students, a lot of our students have jobs, and things like that. It's that's too many units. They shouldn't be taking that many things. So that's probably more likely what that article. I'd have to look it up though.
Well, even the fee structure at a 4-year institution, it's more expensive if you're there for longer, right? Because it's not per class, it's
right,
per
it's
sets of classes, right? Awesome.
So when you were talking about that percentage of students who are at community college, and then you said 2% in colleges were autistic and 5% had ADHD, so then that would be concentrated in community colleges, right? So would that number be higher in community colleges? Would we expect to need more services here?
I would guess yes, but the prevalence literature is terrible in this area, so that 2% is sort of what we think. But a lot of neurodivergent students don't disclose their disability, and students who make it to college who are neurodivergent sometimes don't even have a diagnosis. So sometimes students are so academically gifted that, they didn't have any services, because that's how the education system works, is if you're academically okay, they don't want to give money to I definitely disagree with this, but they don't necessarily want to give students, for social, emotional, social communication, things like that in K through 12. So a lot of these students who make it to college, who are, intellectually able to go to college, they don't necessarily even know to ask for services, so it's really hard to say, but I would guess that there are more students in community colleges than in 4-year universities, yes.
And just to add, the 2 and 5% are kind of aggregated across the literature, across different types of colleges. So again, not great data, outdated data, but that's kind of what we're looking at here.
Hi, I had a question from one of your slides, and honestly, I don't know if you would be best to answer this or somebody above me here at the college, but you said on one of your slides the strategies is for faculty to know the rights and the laws around these students. And do you have resources? Is there somewhere you would recommend for us to know that? Everything from, can we talk to the parent who tries to email us at the beginning of the semester, even though their student is already 18, or when it comes to group work in the classroom, and you want to make that student feel accepted and have a role in the group, but you can just tell as a human that the other students in that group are like, oh no, we got that student. Help, please.
It's almost as if you have read some of our case studies that we have in our training. This is exactly what we have, exactly some of those scenarios that we're going to go over in our training. The the parent that contacts you, right? And what to do about the student who asks questions in the classroom, and you want to be supportive, but you also want to make sure you're accommodating and supporting everyone else there too, right? In terms of laws, we discussed that in our training as well. I don't know and I'm not trying to just self-promote, but I don't know if there's a single like one-stop shop for disability laws, and your campus may have a resource or a website for that, but we'll certainly go over a lot of that in our training. Hopefully you can be there.
And another thing that we always recommend, besides our own training, is that if you don't know something, the disability office on your campus probably does, and a lot of faculty don't take the time, it's just like another thing they have to do or something, to ask the question. But it's better to protect yourself and your campus and the student and all the people involved in whatever you have going on, to reach out to your DSPS office if there's something that you don't know, right?
And I'll just piggyback here. So we've got our faculty, the neuro prep faculty training, and then after the lunch hour, DSPS personnel, students, and alumni are going to share some successes and some challenges. And I think that a lot of those kinds of questions might be interrogated or teased out to give us or inform our process in the coming year. Any other questions? I'm not seeing any. Well, thank you, Sasha and Yaz. I had an opportunity to read their PowerPoint, but reading a PowerPoint is so different than a live presentation, and I'm just so grateful that they're here today to kick off our semester. Also, thank you for those of you who arrived live and through the live stream. I know what it's like to crawl back this semester. I literally feel like I'm crawling one toe at a time, not a foot. And so I'm just grateful that you spent the morning with us. I didn't finish saying what the rest of the day would look like earlier, so we have the neuro prep training, the lunch hour. The lunch will be provided for faculty who participate in the training. Then immediately after, DSPS personnel, students, and alumni will join us for 2 panels, and then we're gonna end the day by watching Autism Goes to College, which is a 1-hour documentary in here. We are moving between 2 spaces today. So we've got the McKinney Theater and SSC 212. The reason why we wanted to do that is because the training is better when we're all working around tables. And I'm just so pleased that we have this on our campus, and grateful for you to participate. Have a beautiful day.